As you write your summary, your first assignment, in your manuscript, you'll be expected to cite your sources, both within the text as you write, and also provide a reference list at the end. And this can, in many cases, be a really confusing process for students, so this tutorial video will be used to walk you through that process. On page 176 of your APA manual, you will see this table on the left-hand side. And this is really your guideline for citing your sources within the text as you write. And there are two different types of citations that you'll use. One is considered in-text citation, and the other is considered a parenthetical citation. And what I've done on the right-hand side in a Word document that you have access to on your Canvas page is I've given you a sentence example of how you would use an in-text citation and a parenthetical citation. What you'll notice, though, is that how you format your citation will differ based on whether the article you're citing has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 or more authors. It also will depend on whether it is the first time you are citing this study in your paper, or if it's the second or other subsequent citations. On the right-hand side, let's start walking through this Word document. If you have a single author of an article that you're citing, and you want to present information from that article in your manuscript within the text, then you could state, Walker, 2007, showed that high-intensity exercise was significantly inversely associated with insulin resistance. Alternately, instead of using the in-text, you could use a parenthetical format. In this case, you'd have to change the wording just a little bit and add the citation in at the end of the sentence. In this case, high-intensity exercise has been shown to be significantly inversely associated with insulin resistance. Walker, 2007. Notice the differences between introducing the author at the beginning of a sentence versus at the end of a sentence. Here, there is no comma, and there are parentheses around the year. At the end of the sentence, there is a comma separating the author's last name from the year that the article was published. And all of that is in parentheses, and the period comes not before the citation, but after the citation. That's a common mistake that students make. If the article that you are citing has two authors, then the format changes slightly. Now, when you introduce the authors at the beginning of a sentence, you need to mention both authors' last name. In this case, Walker and Allen, 2007. Notice that when you're doing the in-text citation, you spell out the word and, versus when you do a parenthetical citation, you use the and symbol. That's another common mistake, and that's why I have it highlighted throughout. Still, you have a comma separating the two authors from the year. Continuing this theme, when you're giving an in-text citation, you want to mention all of the authors, Walker, Allen, and Sue, 2007. At the end, we replace the word and with the symbol, and we still have this comma separating the author list from the year. With 4 authors, that is repeated. We list all 4 authors in the in-text and in the parenthetical citation. The same with 5 authors, and then we get something slightly different when we have 6 or more authors. When we have 6 or more authors, it becomes a little bit too cumbersome in the paper to list all of the authors. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and abbreviate with this symbol et al., Walker and others, 2007. Notice that there is no period after et. The only period is after the AL and there is no comma separating the author et al. From the year, but there is in the parenthetical citation. All of these examples that I've shown you is how you would reference these authors the first time that you cite them. It changes slightly when you provide subsequent citations. So let's say we first introduced Walker 2007 in our introduction, and then we mention that study again when we write our discussion section. In that case, the format might change. Now, you'll notice that if you have one author, the format for the first citation and the subsequent citations does not change. The same is true when you have two authors. The first and subsequent citations are identical. But when you have three or more authors, you now need to be careful with your first and subsequent citation format. The first time you cite your studies, you want to mention all of the authors, whether it's at the beginning of a sentence or in a parenthetical citation. That's to give all authors credit. But now that we've given all authors credit for the work, in subsequent citations we can abbreviate it with et al., whether it's in text or whether it's parenthetical. And that process is repeated throughout. Now let's talk about formatting your reference list. The first thing to note is that you will have multiple references for your summary assignment and for your manuscript. And since you have multiple references, you will need to place them in a particular order. They will be ordered alphabetically by the author's last name, the first author's last name. The author list looks like this. You will write out all authors' last name, and then you will give the author's initials for their first and middle name if provided. So it's the author's last name followed by a comma, space, the author's first name initial, period, no space, the author's middle name initial, comma, space, and then you start in with subsequent authors. When you get to the last author, it will be separated by an and symbol, not the word and written out. Following your author list, there is no additional period after the final author's name. In parentheses, you'll have the year that the article was published, followed by a period. Then you will have a space, and you will have the title of the article, not the title of the journal, the title of the article, and only the first letter of the first word of that article title will be capitalized. Everything else will be lowercase. You're then going to put a period following the title of the article, and you will now write the title of the journal. The title of the journal must be italicized, and the first letter of each word is now capitalized, except for articles of, the, and. You'll notice that this word, of, is all lowercase, and that will always be the case. So the title of the journal is considered mixed case because the first letter of every word is going to be capitalized, and the title of the journal is italicized. You then place a comma, and then you put the volume number italicized, and everything else will not be italicized. Issue, in parentheses, notice that there is no space between the volume number and the issue. It's then followed by a comma, and then the page range, the first page that the article starts on, hyphen, and the last page. that the article finishes on, which will have your reference list. And at the very end, there is a period. So that is how to format your reference list. And notice all of the detail that is involved. And any little mistakes, like having too many spaces or not having a space, or not doing mixed case for the title of the journal, not doing all lowercase for the title of the article, those sorts of mistakes will cost you points throughout the semester.